I'm the executive director of SHIELD North Carolina, which is an anti-human trafficking organization in Central North Carolina. It's Apex, just outside of Raleigh. I'm also the co-founder and co-leader of the North Carolina Demand Reduction Task Force. The task force was created several years ago in an effort to gather the statewide stakeholders, and we just kind of talked. A lot of us were seeing the same things, had the same realization that nothing was happening to the buyers. We were starting to see research that shows that addressing demand was the best way to prevent trafficking, and also survivors were telling us that nothing was happening to the buyers. So we co-founded this task force along with other stakeholders in North Carolina and survivors, and we lead this. Our goal is to launch effective demand reduction programs to address both labor and sex trafficking here in North Carolina. So each year, let me get to the next slide here. Each year, we host a webinar series. This year is the first year that we've opened it up to the public and held it in the evening so that the general public is able to attend. We did this to propel the expansion of the narrative in order to include demand, because as we know, supporting survivors and prosecuting traffickers is absolutely essential, and so is holding buyers accountable. Buyers are the ones fueling this crime. They're creating the demand, and demand reduction, as I mentioned, it's the only research-backed strategy proven to prevent human trafficking. If there are no buyers, there are no victims. So this year's webinar, we aim to invite the public in to see the full picture and to help expand that conversation. Here you can see our introductory webinar. We discussed how demand fuels the human trafficking industry. Last week, we learned how culture shapes the normalization of exploitation and objectifying other individuals. Today, we're going to learn from a lived experience expert as she describes demand reduction from her perspective. And each of these webinars, we wanted to give everyone specific things that they can do, a way that they can join the demand reduction movement. And the final section will pull it all together and empower you and empower you to invite others to join this demand reduction movement. So thank you all for being here. When I was looking over the registrants for tonight, I was excited and just humbled by all of you that are joining. We have people from Maine to Florida, all along the East Coast. We have 16 different states represented. I think the farthest west was Nevada, and several states in between. We have several of you are from Canada. We even have someone from Greece. I'm curious to what time it is there now, but thank you for joining us. It's really exciting to see everybody coming together, and I can just imagine the work that we can do if we all join together. We have, as far as professions go, we have the wonderful folks that are offering direct services, as well as the public joining us tonight. And then we have, I wrote this down, representatives from school boards, juvenile justice, healthcare, faith communities, law school, legislative advocates, Goodwill, Salvation Army, therapists, social workers, from everyone from all types of systems. And I can just imagine the force we would be if we all worked together and collaborated to try to prevent human trafficking. So I'm looking forward to staying in touch with everyone even after the webinar series. So let's get to it. Jennifer has expressed her desire to answer your questions. So if you could at the bottom of your screen or top, wherever your menu bar is, you should see a Q&A. If you could put any questions you have there, that's where I'll look for them. I'll try to look in the chat too, but sometimes the questions get lost there. So if you put them in the Q&A section, I'll be able to have Jennifer answer those, and we'll probably stop along the way and answer some of your questions. She also requested that you put in the chat while you're here tonight, why you care about this cause. And now I want to introduce Jennifer, my friend. She is a familial trafficking survivor and a member of the North Carolina Survivors Network. She is a BA in humanities and is a trained advocate for the victims of domestic violence and sexual assault. She's also a graduate of Elevate Academy. Her advocacy reflects a deep insight and unwavering commitment to protect children from exploitation. She moderates support groups and mentors adult survivors of childhood sexual exploitation. Her mission centers on empowering survivors and educating others on the link between familial sex trafficking and domestic violence. And I can attest to the fact that she is her voice is just vital to this work. And so it is my great honor to introduce you to Jennifer.
Thank you, Miss Nikki. I appreciate that lovely introduction, and I'm so honored to be here tonight with you all, and it's just such a privilege. So give me just a second here. I'm going to share my screen. Alrighty. And yeah, please do introduce yourself in the chat, and why this cause is important to you. And I'm also curious too in the audience if there's anyone who has any experience with encountering victims of familial trafficking, if you've run across that, and maybe even a little bit about what you know about it. Just feel free or not. Either way is fine. So I'm just curious. Okay. So here it is. So I created a presentation here called No Demand equals No Victims equals the end of exploitation. Well, don't we all want that? Would be wonderful. Okay, just a little FYI, as far as trigger warnings, I would say it's low to medium. I give no details of trauma. The overall theme, of course, is emotionally activating, but I keep it really low key. And of course, what is triggering for one person might not be for another, but I just like to throw it out there just in case. Also, I definitely speak just from like my own experiences, things that I've learned throughout my life experiences. So I refer to that as I go through. And also, I need to say that I am a Christian, and so I will be referring to Christian language, some Bible scripture, but of course we understand everybody absolutely has a right, to their own beliefs, and just take what you like, leave the rest, kind of a thing. Everyone is welcome. And also, yeah, just apply what works for you. Okay, so about me. So when I thought about me, actually, it's about the Lord. He who delivered me from the grip of those who sought to destroy me. The trauma that I suffered growing up, it brought me to nothing. But in him, I am born again of the Spirit and made new. And then here's another thing that's interesting to note. The buyers, they never called me by my name. I was just an object to them. But guess who does call me by my name? Jesus Christ. He sought me and he made me his own as my forever shepherd and father in heaven who leads the way. I hear his voice and I follow him. And now I know him personally, one-on-one. We have a tight relationship. Okay, and then these verses kind of talk to that. So Isaiah 43:1, he tells me, fear not, Jennifer, for I have redeemed thee by thy name. He calls me by my name. Thou art mine. I belong to him. No more do I belong to the trafficker and all the buyers. I belong to him now. And John 10:3, I love the whole chapter, John 10. He calls his own sheep by name, and he leadeth them out. I didn't get me out of anything. The Lord led me out. So I have to give him credit where credit is due. I would simply not be here today if it was not for him and the work he's done in me. Okay, so the objective for this presentation, I assume we all have this in common. We want to reduce exploitation, the objectification of people, meaning dehumanize. We want to reduce dehumanization. We want to reduce victim blaming. That especially has really got to stop. And we want to increase buyer accountability, safety for the children across the board, and supporting the victims, better support for the victims and survivors, and protection for all the vulnerable. And that includes elderly, disabled, those that are homeless or in poverty. There are so many vulnerable populations, and everyone who's vulnerable is considered a target this day and age in the world of trafficking. So here is just an overview here of what we're going to go through. So I'm going to start with my testimony, and then we'll go into the victim impact. And I'm going to be particularly speaking on the impact, personal impact to my life, but I also, as Nikki stated in the beginning, I have been in support groups for survivors for a while now, quite a while. And so I do advocate and mentor them as a sponsor, if you will, is what I like to call it, or fellow traveler, we call it sometimes. So I know a lot of survivors personally, and so I kind of speak on their behalf too, but in a general way. All right, and then I'll go through some survivor recovery, kind of what that looks like for me, and which is about it's about repairing the damage. And then I go into buyers. We want justice and accountability. And I had an interview with a wonderful man named Tom. And so I put some of his responses in that. So we'll go through that a bit. So my testimony, I am a survivor of familial trafficking. So what is it? What is familial trafficking? Well, it's when a family member, the trafficker, sells a child in the family to a buyer for sex and or labor in exchange for anything of value to the trafficker. And when it says the trafficker sells a child, another way of describing that could be like renting out, because they could sell a child, a family could sell a child and they get the money for it, and they might never see the child again. Or they can rent out the child and the child comes back and they do it over and over again. So it's really about selling and renting. Okay, and then, yeah, in exchange for anything of value to the trafficker. So what are some things of value to the trafficker? Lots and lots and lots of things. It can be so many things, but these are just some. Money, drugs, alcohol, paying off a debt, rent, food, services, a place to stay, and even power and control and status within the community. And then who can be family traffickers? Parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, siblings, step-parents, foster parents, anyone who is considered a parental guardian of the child. I know many survivors. I know a survivor who was trafficked by their grandparent, another one who was trafficked by an uncle, quite a few trafficked by their siblings, even another one by a cousin, and foster parents. So yeah. And it is important to keep in mind that when educating parents and others about how to protect children from traffickers and buyers, please realize that sometimes parents are the traffickers. So here's my testimony, no details, very general. My story is way too huge, so we're bringing it down to this. I am a survivor of familial trafficking, and you can follow along here. I grew up in an environment of domestic violence, addiction, divorce, and being raised by single parents, all of which are big vulnerabilities for any child. I was drugged by my family trafficker and the buyers. They exposed me to pornography as a method of normalizing sexual exploitation. I was trafficked for years to neighbors, friends of the family, and out of two-bar restaurants. I aged out at 19, and my trafficker dropped me off in another state. Then God led me to Himself over the years through various 12-step programs, books, therapists, domestic violence recovery, survivor communities, and most importantly, through His Son, Jesus Christ, and His preserved written word, the King James Bible, to help me in my lifelong journey of recovery, restoration, and healing. Now I connect with other survivors as we help each other work through the hard stuff, processing the unspeakable. We get to do that with each other because we know each other can handle it. And we believe each other too, which is the best part of, peer support. And as I am comforted of God, that comfort I am able to give to others who are suffering through the mutual peer support stuff. That takes me to this verse, 2 Corinthians 1:3-4. Blessed be God, even the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of mercies and the God of all comfort, who comforteth us in our tribulation. Tribulation is any form of suffering, trials. You probably heard that term. And He comforts us. Why? So that we may be able to comfort them which are in any trouble. Trouble, again, meaning suffering, by the comfort wherewith we ourselves are comforted of God. Now we're going to go into the victim impact. I'm going to go through basically the whole idea of loss and grief. For those especially who grow up in any kind of abusive family systems, and particularly familial trafficking childhoods, we essentially lose our entire childhood. We don't have a childhood. And so that is a lifelong grief that never goes away, especially for those of us who may not have found replacement families. So that is something to keep in mind when working with survivors of family trafficking. We don't have a family, not blood family anyway. Okay, so look at the picture. That's a crushed car. So when I think of victim impact, it's really about a car crushed life. And it's a life that doesn't even really get to launch. There's developmental delays, right? We don't develop normally like others if we're just busy trying to survive all this trauma that's happening to us. We're literally in survival mode and kind of dissociated too, so not really there as a way to survive it. So victim impact is also about processing the betrayal that leads to trust issues. So we're betrayed by family. We're betrayed. A lot of the buyers, they can be friends of the family, doctors, teachers, any trusted authority figures are actually the ones that are purchasing us. So it makes sense that we would have some trust issues. The people that could help, the people in authority, are actually the ones hurting us. And then, of course, the betrayal by the family. That's number one. And then you add the community on top of that. That's a lot of betrayal to process and work through. One of the buyers was a doctor. I remember that. Okay, and so the victim impact, again, it's about compromised safety and security. So we don't even know what that feels like, really. And the body does remember, Even if we block out the memories or detach from it somehow, the body always does remind us that it's still carrying some of the trauma. And so those issues do come back and sometimes turn into chronic health issues, which I am very familiar with. And it all ties back to the early trauma. And it is a relief to understand finally, like the cause of it. It's a good thing to recognize that. A lot of survivors, there's a loss of income due to disability, lifelong disability for some. Also, we suffer from a sense of worthlessness because if our own family is going to do these things to us, well, that's as a child, that's where we develop our sense of worth. And if our only family is treating us this way, then yeah, we don't ever even launch in that capacity. And then on top of the family stigmatization and being blamed, then we experience that in the community as well. So there is we're stigmatized, we're blamed, and of course we suffer great disgrace from the buyers just for having done the things. And then there sometimes can be a spiritual disconnect. Again, goes back to the trust issues. It's hard to trust in God if He didn't stop it. As children and even as adults, it's hard to understand that. So that takes work to get to that point. All right. And then many survivors, they lose marriages, lose their children. Many don't even get to the point where, they even have a marriage or children. And yeah, a lot of us live with chronic post-traumatic stress and flashbacks. That's a given. Okay, so the role of porn from the victim lens. So one of the ways that I was instructed, if you will, on how to behave in my childhood was through pornography. So I was shown it, and that's what created my perception of how life in the world is supposed to be, because that's all I knew as a child, right? So the effects of porn, it distorted my reality, obviously. It's what lowered resistance. It lowers resistance in the victim because they think that they have to, in order for approval, they have to behave the way those images are show what they show. Also, it's how we learn that pleasure is associated with violence. So it brings in the whole subject of violence. It normalizes, in a nutshell, exploitation as a normal thing. And there's something wrong with you if you don't want to be exploited or if you don't engage in this behavior. And then, yeah, so it's used as a training instruction manual, if you will, to a lot of the victims. I've heard of many survivors that said they were shown porn growing. Teach. It's a teaching tool on how to behave, how to look, and it gives you a sense of a purpose. Like this is what we're supposed to be when we grow up. This is what we're supposed to be right now. It creates our belief system as all children develop their belief systems about many things. That's where all the core issues come from, childhood. And so for someone who suffers abuse, then of any kind in exploitation, that's where we're learning that basically wrong is right. And it also we're trained to, like, our worth is, because we don't have self-worth, so but we develop worth based on our performance. So traffickers and buyers have a way of rewarding good behavior, in other words. And they also have a way of punishing bad behavior. So we learn early on how to survive all of that. And a lot of us go into the fawning mode. There's Pete Walker, his complex PTSD book. There's 4 responses: fight, flight, freeze, fawn. And fawn is basically out of control codependency. I'm going to go out of my way to make sure you're happy with me, that I'm not a threat to you in any way, is a way to keep myself safe. And then, of course, all children form their identities as children, and through the use of porn and all the abuse, I learned quickly that I am just an object to be used and discarded at will. And children always want to be included and want to be approved of. And so that's where I learned I was going to get my approval, was based on how I performed. And I learned that my identity was created just simply to serve and please others, that we have no needs. That's a very common thing I've heard. And ultimately, we lose our sense of true self. The true self doesn't even really get a chance to merge or emerge. So here's just a list. I'm just going to go through this quickly. So grief, loss, and damages summed up pretty much. We lose innocence, loss of self-respect, loss of authentic relationships. Like I said earlier, no healthy childhood development. We're not taught to work for goals or dreams. We're not developing normal life skills on how to survive. We're not prepared for adulthood. We don't understand unconditional love. We learn that being used is so exploitation based acceptance and approval. That's where we're going to get it, through being exploited. We lose boundaries, but really we never even developed them in the first place. And we live with confusion. What felt wrong, we're being told and forced to believe is right. So that creates a great sense of consistent confusion. Also, the damage is a sense of degradation and shame. That's a constant as well. And we're essentially trying to survive in hypervigilance mode. We always sense danger right around the corner. So we're talking a lot of cortisol release, right? The adrenaline, all of that is really hard on the body. And as we get older, sometimes it shows up in very negative ways if we live like that, especially our first 20 years of life. We are manipulated to believe lies. And we definitely go with unmet needs, which makes us just really disconnect from ourselves. So loss of community support as well. If no one's identifying what's happening, no one's rescuing us, we're just kind of left to fend for ourselves. People in my story, there were people that knew and that saw, and they did nothing. So that's where I learned I couldn't trust the inside, but I also couldn't trust the outside. And so damage, again, is developing a sex object identity. That's very damaging to carry that self-perception. We live with a chronic state of fear and isolation. And we learn that being used equals love, and relationships equal exploitation. So there's what's called ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. I'm sure you all have heard of that. And it's really excellent. I highly recommend, if you haven't heard of it, look into it. It's basically a 10 question test to determine what score, or the higher the score, the higher your risk of disease, developing disease, social and emotional problems as an adult. And so the questionnaire for adults include the following. So it touches upon, did you suffer physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional, verbal, physical or emotional neglect, separation or divorce, a family member with mental illness, a family member addicted to drugs or alcohol, a family member who is in prison, witnessing a parent being abused. So if you have a high score of that, then the outcomes don't look really good. And that we'll go into this a little bit. So abuse produces toxic stress, meaning a toxic stress response. Again, the body does take it on. There's no way out of that, especially if there's no help for the victim, right? There's no way to even decompress, come back to a sense of safety. It's just a constant sense of danger and chaos, really. So here it says, a consensus of scientific evidence demonstrates that high doses of cumulative adversity experienced during critical and sensitive periods of early life development without the buffering protections of trusted, nurturing caregivers and safe, stable environments, that is so key, can lead to long-term disruptions in brain development and immune, hormonal, and metabolic systems, a condition known as the toxic stress response. So the adverse childhood experiences and toxic stress are associated with an increased risk of a wide range of health conditions in both pediatric and adult populations, known as ACE-associated health conditions. The life expectancy among populations with 6 or more out of 10, so that's how they measure the score, 6 or more of these childhood experiences, this is mind-blowing. The life expectancy is 19 years shorter than that of populations with none. So here is a survivor, Jessa Crisp. She is a survivor of family trafficking. And I did speak with her, and she did give me permission to use this in this presentation. So she, here in this video, hopefully you guys will be able to hear it, she reads an open letter to one of her buyers. So join her as she embraces her story and shares her process of entering into freedom from the memory of one who bought and brutally raped her. So she's going to be reading a letter she wrote to one of the buyers. And Nikki, if there's an issue, technology, just let me know.
To one of my buyers, I don't know your story, the story that led you to purchase my body for sex. Yet over and over again, I have imagined that your wife did not know that you would come to my room each week wearing the ring she gave you on your wedding day. Most likely she did not know that you would show me, just a little girl at the time, pictures of your family, including your 2 young daughters that were around my age. I'm guessing she did not know the way you would call me by their names and describe in details your fantasies to brutally rape them, always starting with smothering them so they couldn't fight back. Every time that you would place the pillow on my face, a dichotomy existed within me. On one hand, I hoped that I would die so I could escape my living hell, and on the other hand, I desired to live so that I could keep your little girls from experiencing the things that you did to me. As I became a woman, you told me I wasn't what you were really wanting. You told me that you liked younger girls because, in your own words, they made your heart burst with excitement. Rejection and terror seized my entire being. How many other little girls have you purchased and hurt throughout your lifetime, exchanging your money for a sexual release of sadistic pleasure? The reality is, although I have had many buyers, both men and women, who've purchased my body for the dark reality of their hidden desires, I am remembering you tonight. Your body odor and rancid breath are permanently burned into my memory, including the way it felt to have you stare at me and the way your hands groped me. I'm remembering what it felt like to not be able to breathe and the gasp of breath that would come when the rush of cool air would hit my face. I'm remembering the ways that my body and my heart would hurt after you would leave. Since I never looked you in the eyes, it would be impossible for me to identify you in a lineup or a mugshot, which means I do not have enough evidence or information to turn you in. I only have my intimate memories, my triggers, and the deep pain I carry. Here, I have had to come to terms with the fact that I will never experience the relief of knowing that your sick fantasies have been stopped for good. This reality in and of itself has been excruciatingly hard for me to process. Then, as I have had people tell me that I need to publicly say names and put people like you in jail for the crimes that they've committed against me as a little girl. But I do not have the ability to put people in jail. That is the job of a judge. All I can do is tell my truth, so that is what I am doing. I am learning that justice is not my responsibility, nor should the pursuit of criminal charges be the societal expectation placed on victims of crime. Rather, our only responsibility is to pursue healing, which for me has included the process of forgiving you. Forgiving you does not mean that you are left off the hook for what you have done to me. Rather, forgiveness means that I am pursuing my own journey of healing and releasing you to God, living in my freedom. My body, it does not belong to you anymore. Rather, I am choosing to express my grief and vulnerably talk about the traumas that I have experienced, as well as embrace the things that bring me joy. The shame I have felt through this process is not mine to carry, it is yours. I pray for you that someday you will repent of your crimes and turn yourself in. I pray that you will find Jesus. I pray for your wife. I pray for your daughters and other victims of your crimes, that they too will be able to experience freedom from the emotional pain of your choices and harmful actions. I pray for the little girl inside of me, that she will also be able to live completely free. Justice will come. It has not been silenced by your abuse, nor is it lost by my Redeemer. I might not know your story, but I am choosing to live within mine. I am Jessa Dillow Crisp.
So there's Jessa. So she explains it really well, her experience as the victim. So that's Jessa. So when it comes to the impact and the effects of trauma on a child, on an adult, the buyer walks away, leaving the long-term damage behind. In other words, buyers experience a moment of pleasure, while their victims have a lifetime of recovery ahead of them. And now we're going to move into survivor recovery. So this is about, we come out of this with all this damage. What do we do with it, right? And I want to say too, I want to preface that what works for one survivor might not work for another. And there are so many good tools out there. And I think it's really important to be aware of what's out there so that survivors can pick and choose, right? Like what speaks to them most. So that's part of what my agenda here, or my objective, is to inform you guys of some resources that have helped me, in hopes that perhaps you can share them as options to those you work with. So again, recovery is unique and it's variable. And also, some survivors heal quicker than others. So there's a lot of factors to consider. If a survivor, for example, has a loving family to go back to, let's say a child was trafficked through somebody online and they, lured them out of the house, and they go back to a loving family who talks about it, and the victim has a way to not hide it, but bring it out in the open, allowing others to care and support them, then their recovery is going to go differently than someone who doesn't have that. And so it's variable. And of course, you got to consider biological, right? So some people, their systems are just equipped to be more resilient than others. So it's important to remember that just because some survivors come out super resilient for whatever reasons, others won't. or they take longer, and all of it should be allowed and accepted, and no one should be rushed to hurry up and get better just because, they're no longer being trafficked. We're left with the damage, which for some of us, it is lifelong recovery, which is my case. And so what we have to do as survivors is we have to make a conscious choice to choose life, because of course it is normal to have suicidal ideation. For who wants to live with all those memories, right? And flashbacks and the consequences, the ongoing damage and loss and grief. It's a very hard reality to navigate, not just going through it, but ongoing. So we have to make a conscious choice. Do we want to live or do we not? And I love this verse, Deuteronomy 30:19. God really brought me to this one day, and it really made me realize, okay, I got to be real conscious about this. And it says, I call heaven and earth to witness against you this day that I have set before you life and death, blessing and cursing. Therefore, choose that both you and your descendants, in other words, choose life, that both you and your descendants may live. It's a conscious choice, and one that some of us have to work at on a day-to-day basis. So we also have to work through a whole lot of shame and a whole lot of self-blame because all of that is piled on us during the trauma, the abuse, and then society comes in and kind of takes it from there, from those that just simply don't understand it. It's hard to believe it. A lot of people don't want to believe that this actually happens, especially family trafficking, that parents or family members would do this to their own children. That's an impossible reality to comprehend. So I don't blame people for not wanting to accept it. I don't want to accept it, and it happened to me. So it is very hard, but we have to because family trafficking is extremely common, even more so since COVID. And thank God more and more people are beginning to accept this form of trafficking and that it does happen. Okay, so we got to be able to tolerate the intolerable reality of what this is. So obviously we have to learn how to develop boundaries from scratch. We literally have no concept of boundaries. And when I think of boundaries, it's not just boundaries for myself that, I have to have, with other people. If there's someone that doesn't feel safe, what kind of boundary do I need around that person? Do I have to stop contact altogether, or is there a way to work with it? It's so much to navigate. And but it's about having boundaries with myself. How much do I share? But then that requires getting to know myself really well, because remember what I said, we don't have needs. We learned that growing up, that to have needs is very bad. And so part of recovery is trying to even figure out what we need, what we want, what we like. How do we speak all of that? That's a whole nother thing. So it's a lot of work. Okay, we have to overcome, or I like to say deprogram, from an object identity. So if I'm not an object, then who am I? Well, that's a whole lot of work too. We also have to realize, that asking for help is not a bad thing, but it's a really hard thing because we were created to help others, right? In their needs and the wrong needs. We were forced to meet needs that no child should ever meet. We need to be allowed the process of grieving. We don't okay, we're not being trafficked anymore. It's been 3 months, time's up. Get happy, get a life, get over it, move on. It does not work like that. Not for extreme trauma. Extreme trauma can take a lifetime of constant work. It is for me, because mine was that bad. And I know many other survivors very similar to myself and our recovery process. So I have received a lot of the validation I need to okay, I am doing everything I can do, and there's still issues. So so I like to tell other survivors, especially those that are new to my support groups, it's okay to just feel everything you feel, no matter what anyone says, no matter what you tell yourself. Just feel it, express it, write it out, speak it out with no shame. It's okay. And you get to feel your feelings as long as you need to. And that's not up for anyone to determine a time limit on that. And I'm amazed at how many survivors are just like, really? They're like surprised to hear that stuff. So I have to kind of reiterate and tell myself, and I need other survivors to tell me the same. So I definitely am highly recommend support groups, peer led, because who understands survivors better than survivors? I would not be, I would not, I would not be where I am, and I'm not even where I want to be. But I would not have what I have right now if it wasn't for other survivors. Because to be alone going through the trauma is the worst part. And then to be alone trying to recover from it as an adult is also the worst part. So thank God we have each other. It's also important for survivors and everyone to accept that healing is nonlinear. Just because a survivor is thriving one day doesn't mean they're going to thrive the next. Or they could thrive half the day and then suddenly something happens, they get triggered and they're regressed, and the rest of the day doesn't go well. All of that needs to be allowed and given space. Recovery is non-linear and it's unpredictable as well. So these are just some of the tools that have worked for me. Definitely my connection with God, daily Bible study. That is my comfort, is God's word. It's where I have come to know the Lord and who he is and what he has to say to me. He has shown me all throughout his word. Things that I never would have thought applied to me actually do. It's amazing. And then also, like I said, connecting with other survivors, absolutely very critical to address the childhood trauma, even for survivors who were not family trafficked. A lot of times they were abused in a lot of other ways. And that's what actually made them vulnerable to being trafficked later on by non-family. So it's important, if there's any childhood abuse, that has to be addressed, that has to be dealt with and grieved. And also, I highly recommend 12-step recovery. I would not have survived if it weren't for 12-step recovery. I've been in many programs for 4 decades now, I think. Can't believe it. Also, Celebrate Recovery is a really great ministry as well. It's Christian-based. And Journey to Heal, I highly recommend that for survivors of any form of sexual exploitation by family, non-family. It's excellent. It's an 8-week support group. And all of these things too are like at no cost. And it's very common for survivors to not be able to afford, a lot of the therapeutic tools and stuff that we need. So God has made sure that there's a whole lot of affordable options for us. And so I'm thankful for that, because there's a lot of that. And of course, let's see. Oh, and Mending the Soul. Oh, I love Mending the Soul. That is so good. I moderated a group for a while there. It's just wonderful. And you can just search all these, find a lot of information. And obviously, if we're going to have a therapist, they got to be trauma and trafficked informed. And what does that mean? It means they understand trauma, all forms of it, even the worst forms of trauma. They need to understand extreme trauma and be able to tolerate the reality of it and the fallout, the effects, which are, long term. And then trafficking, I put that there because a lot of people have no clue what family trafficking is. They can't even believe it happens. So it's very important. I've helped a lot of survivors of childhood sexual abuse determine that, oh, really, that what happened to me was family trafficking? And I say, yeah, it is. So things that they have shared. So it's important for adult survivors, whatever age, to put the pieces together and call it what it is. I had to do that. And again, the peer support groups, I'm not going to go through all this because this is being recorded, so you can go back and kind of read through this. But Celebrate Recovery, it's Christian-based. Journey to Heal, Christian-based. These are support groups. CODA, Codependency Anonymous, 12-step program. We become very codependent. It's it comes from the fawn response, where we seek to please and we're in a constant state of anxiety, like we're just not going to please well enough. Survivors of Sexual Assault Anonymous is a 12-step program for those recovering from childhood and adult sexual assaults. Excellent. And adult children of alcoholics and dysfunctional families. I love, love, love ACA. Really good to get on a path of recovering from childhood abuse of all its forms. And then I won't read this, but this is a bit about mending the soul. So I've got a little bit more there that when you're going back to the recording, you can pause and read through that. It's just lovely. I love mending the soul. And some books that I recommend. Bessel van der Kolk, we all know, The Body Keeps the Score. Judith Herman, I love her work. Trauma and Recovery. Joy Forrest, Called to Peace. That's recovering from domestic violence, which I've had to do and continue to do some recovery work around growing up in a very violent home. And the effects of that are also long-term. Dan Allender, I love him as well. He says he is a sexual abuse survivor. He wrote The Wounded Heart, among other books. Stephen Tracy wrote the book Mending the Soul. Crystal Sutherland wrote Journey to Heal, and Crystal is actually based out of Wilmington. I love her, and her work is amazing, her ministry. And Bruce Perry, I love, love him. I heard him speak at one time, and he really does a lot of, gives good insights on connecting childhood trauma to the physical effects of trauma, including verbal abuse, emotional abuse. And he wrote an amazing book called What Happened to You? I believe that's with Oprah Winfrey. And also Diane Langberg. She's like a rock star, in my opinion. She trains churches on sexual abuse and trafficking and the effects of us. She's been working with survivors for, 60 years or something. She wrote On the Threshold of Hope, and that is for survivors. That book helped me so much. Now we're going into the buyers. So we want justice and accountability. Absolutely. So I'm going to introduce Tom now. And let me just go right into it for the sake of time. So I'm going to read his biography. Oh my, time goes by so fast. So his biography, he says, I found porn at a very young age and was hooked immediately. I was addicted to it from the time I was about 8 until my 50s. In 2001, God called me to start healing and to help other men struggling with sex addiction. My wife and I started a ministry helping couples and individuals to find freedom from addiction and co-addiction, and have been doing this for 24 years now. We have been married for 45 years and have had to heal from many things to make it work, but God has been leading us all the way. And a quote that I really like, he says, it's important to note this. When it comes to sex addiction and buyers, you can be an offender and not an addict. You can be an addict and not an offender, and some can be both. So it's important to notice. And it is also understood and common that a lot of buyers are addicted to sex and pornography, and eventually they can act it out, with the children and getting, so it all connects, typically. So just a little FYI here, I did not interview Tom alone. His wife was present at all times. We communicated through email, Zoom, and a group text as I took him through a series of questions. His responses are based on his experience in recovery from porn addiction, including men that he's ministered to throughout the years. Some of the men he's worked with, they have purchased sex, but he has not. Tom gave me permission to share his responses on this PowerPoint. Tom is available for contact to discuss more for anyone here who is interested. He's available to continue the conversation. So one of the questions I asked him was, how does porn drive the demand for trafficking? From his perspective, he says, the more you view and engage with porn, the more everything in your life becomes sexualized. Every feeling, need, etc., is answered by turning to sexual stimulation. I'm lonely, I need sex. I'm bored, I need sex. I'm tired, I need sex. I'm happy, I need sex, and so on. So everything is attached to meeting that need. In other words, he says, then the stimulation needs to be intensified, pushing us deeper and deeper into perversion, which also makes sense because all addictions they escalate. They get worse over time. They never get better. They might seem steady for a while, but inevitable, it will catch up and it'll take a turn for the worse, which again is where a lot of sexual abuse to children comes in. The trafficking can be in that more escalated phase of the addiction. It's no longer enough to just look at the images of the children. Now we got to go act it out to maintain that consistent level of high, if you will, that they get from that. Okay, so through our conversation at one point, he referred to what's called the sex addict's 4 core beliefs. So in this book, now Dr. Patrick Carnes, if y'all haven't heard of him, he is fantastic. He's like a guru on the subject. He has written many, many books. And I know of so many recovering sex addicts that have gotten so much help, from his books and his work and stuff. And so one of his books he calls Facing the Shadow. And in that book, he identifies the 4 core beliefs of the sex addict. And this is it. I am basically a bad and unworthy person. No one would love me as I am. My needs are never going to be met if I have to depend on others. Sex is my most important need. So in other words, people don't just show up in life and, act out in all these negative, harmful behaviors. There's something underneath, and it's important to get to the underneath. What are your core beliefs? Where did they form? Who formed them for you? Who taught you things? In what context? And what age? Were you a child? So I say we need an ACEs study for men who purchase sex. And I say men, of course, women also can do that as well. We know that. Okay, but we also know that the majority is men. All right, so what about treatment centers for buyers? I asked him. He said, they are usually required to go through the court system in jail for a few days, then off to a rehab. It's not so effective if it's forced on them and not by choice. The ones who make actual progress are seeking help. They are wanting help. They don't like who they have become versus others who would say, what do I have to do to get out of this in order for me to get whatever it is? It could be, I want my wife back. I want my kids back. So I'll do it so I can get whatever back. In other words, recovery cannot be to appease anyone, he says. And it has to be, addicts must want this for themselves in order for it to work. So what would recovery look like for men who purchase children and adults from traffickers? He says recovery would require them to surrender to Christ and probably to the authorities as well, depending on what they engaged in. Jail time is likely, or at least court-appointed rehab and probation. Some men continue the buying of others for sex in prison while they're in prison, but if they will take advantage of the break in their cycle to focus on their relationship with God while doing time, then they have a better chance of getting healthy once they are released. Very well said. I also asked him, what do you think is most needed in order to reduce the demand for purchasing sex and porn? He said it's twofold. Number one, a closer relationship with God, but we cannot impose that on others. Absolutely. It has to be a personal choice. Number two, rehumanizing people and getting away from objectification and dehumanization. In society in general, everything is designed to make you consumer oriented, to have to buy something in order to be happy. So it becomes less about healthy human connection and more about trying to buy and sell. Again, that is very well said. We've got to get away from objectification of humans and rehumanize people. Any final comments? I asked him regarding buyers. And he made a couple statements here. He says, I think the court sentences need to be longer across the board and significantly longer for the traffickers. Yes, I agree. Next one, how do we address what got them there? See, there it is. Let's get down to the root of the issue, the core beliefs. So, how do we address what got them there? He says, what sent them down that particular path in the first place? These are human beings. I don't want to dehumanize them either. They are not just monsters that came up out of nowhere. These were little boys at one time, just innocent little kids, and something happened in their life to send them down a direction, and they made choices that followed that direction. So they grew up learning things. And so the key to recovery is about unlearning these things. But just like from the victims, we grew up learning things. And so our recovery is about unlearning things, relearning things, deprogramming from the lies. If needs aren't able to get met in the old familiar ways, then how do needs get met in better ways, right? But we need to run to the tools for that. And again, I ask, perhaps we need an ACEs study for the buyers? Where did all this start? Where does it come from? That you think it's okay to just like exploit a little child like that. There's got to be something deeper. And we also understand that a lot of them were either sexually abused or trafficked themselves as children. So it's normal to them too. I know that runs in my family. I've done some digging, and there is trafficking in past generations, and that is very typical. That this is generational. So Tom mentioned 3 books. One is called Breaking Free. The other one is Love and Respect, and the other one is Pure Desire by Ted Roberts. So I'm not going to go into any of that. You'll see that in the recording again if you want to look those up. But I'm sure they are excellent resources. I know Ted Roberts. I'm familiar with his work. He's great. And here's some more books and websites for any buyers who really want to be in recovery. Reformers Unanimous is an excellent recovery group. It's Christian-based, and I'll go into that in a little bit. Again, Dr. Patrick Carnes, Out of the Shadows, I would get all his books. Mark Lacer, he's excellent. He wrote a book called Healing the Wounds of Sex Addiction. And at the bottom there, it says Life Guide for Men by Mark Lacer. That's another one. And Tom recommends that there at the bottom. And let's see what else. Gail Dines, she's amazing. She wrote a book called Pornland. So you want to go to her website to learn more, cultureframed.org. Also, author Russell Willingham, he wrote a book called Breaking Free. Emerson something, he wrote Love and Respect. Steve Gallagher, At the Altar of Sexual Idolatry. He's written some really excellent books. And puredesireministries.org. Check it out. And then Reformers Unanimous, it offers a beacon of hope and transformation for individuals battling addiction. It provides a faith-based approach to recovery that empowers lives and restores purpose. Grounded in faith, community, and personal growth, RU guides individuals from despair to deliverance, offering a path to freedom, healing, and lasting change. With a commitment to compassion, integrity, and the power of faith, RU stands as a trusted ally in the fight against addiction. And it is an excellent program. And Pure Desire Ministries, really excellent too. Just go to the website. I won't read all this, but basically their mission is to provide hope, freedom, and healing from compulsive sexual behavior and betrayal trauma through Jesus Christ. The vision is to create transformation by mobilizing and equipping churches in America and around the world to develop healing ministries for both men and women. And their values, we believe the church is the hope of the world, and the battle for sexual purity must be won in and through the church. And then you can read the rest in the recording. And then this book, I'm not going to read all this either. You can check it out in the recording. But these authors here, this is a book that just came out. I've not read it, but I looked into it. and it looks amazing. It's called When Men Buy Sex, Who Really Pays? Canadian Stories of Exploitation, Survival, and Advocacy. So these authors, looks like there's a couple of them, they invite readers to confront the dark reality of prostitution and its connection to human trafficking. This contemporary literature review is accompanied by voices of experiential women, a former sex buyer, and noteworthy guest contributors. So again, you can read through that, but I would get that book if you want to understand more about this whole thing. And I want to just pause for a second. I did notice somebody made a comment in the chat. Jean something, I can't remember, Jeannie Sarson, I think her book on non-state torture. I highly recommend her book. Her and her co-author, and they have a website. Please look up that website. It's called, I think it's nonstatetorture.org. Maybe if somebody could put that link in the chat so people can easily have access to it. There is a lot of torture involved with familial trafficking and other forms of child abuse. It's way more common than we want to believe. This nation tends to believe torture just happens in other countries. No, it's huge here. It's huge. So learn about torture and how that is used to control the victims. It's very real. And of course, a call to I call to the men to help. We need a lot more men on this path of educating everyone about trafficking. So there is what's called a call to men, and I know they were on last week. They did a great job. They say we work to transform society by promoting healthy, respectful manhood and offering trainings and educational resources for companies, government agencies, schools, and community groups. So a lot of boys are getting the wrong messages, again, through porn. And so there needs to be some kind of intervention, to help them learn the right things so they don't get hooked on the wrong things, if you will. And that's where Call to Men comes in. Also, Truckers Against Trafficking, they say purchasing sex is not normal behavior. Most sex buyers are men, but most men don't buy sex. In any given year, only 6% of men purchase sex. 25% of sex buyers purchase frequently, accounting for nearly 75% of transactions. This means there is an opportunity for the 94% of men who do not purchase sex to speak up. Well, if that's not a powerful statement, yeah, more men can jump on this mission for sure. So we're winding down here. So let's just review the takeaways that I hope you can take this away from this presentation. The purchasing of sex and pornography, it is not a victimless crime. In other words, children don't say when they're kids, when I grow up, I want to be used for sex. And there is no consent involved. They're not capable of consenting. And then if there's abuse in childhood as an adult, they end up with disabilities. And so they're still not able to consent in their 20s, right? And so we have to understand that these are real victims of very serious crimes. People are not sex objects, possessions, and products to sell and exploit. We're not disposable. So we need some improvement there too, but hard to do that when we're saturated by a culture that is just like porn driven. Everywhere you go, it's everywhere. Can't even go on Facebook or YouTube anymore without seeing images I really didn't ask to see. It's maddening. So the effects of being used and purchased for sex absolutely are long lasting. Sometimes longer for some than others, but it is. Pornography creates a culture of the sexual objectification of humans. I think we get that. Trafficking is fueled by porn. Yeah, absolutely. Either as a teaching tool or victims are being forced to be a part of the porn. They're filmed way more now than in my day, that's for sure. Buyers believe sex is their most important need. Victims and buyers need to be rehumanized to overcome dehumanization. Addressing childhood trauma breaks the cycle of addiction for buyers and victims. I strongly believe that. Not facing and working through and feeling everything that happened, all the trauma that happened as a child is going to create, it's going to keep buyers and victims from moving forward. You have to go into the hard, dark stuff in order to come out to the other side, or at least come out to a certain point. Very important to do that, because that's where belief systems were shaped and created. And then, of course, knowing Christ is key to change for both the buyers and healing for the victims. And I can attest to that, that without the Lord in my life, no, it would not look good. I promise you. And that brings me to this verse, which I love, Galatians 5:1. Stand fast, therefore, in the liberty wherewith Christ has made us free, and be not entangled again with the yoke of bondage. It is a bondage for the victims. Obviously, we're held hostage. We are in serious bondage. And even when we're no longer being trafficked, we're still in bondage until we begin to work through all the layers of lies and everything and grief. And then the same goes for the buyers too. It is also a bondage for them that takes a lot of work to escape and unravel from. So there we are. Thank you, everyone. I'm so glad. Thank you for hearing me, listening. Feel free to post any comments or questions in the chat. Or if you have to go, you're welcome to continue the conversation. You can contact Haley Merkel from North Carolina Demand Reduction Task Force. There is her address there. And maybe somebody could post that information in the chat. So people, if they want to contact her for any reason, I welcome all feedback. Please do provide feedback. How did I do? What could I do differently? All that, I welcome it. And lastly, feel free to scan the QR code, for a list of resources. There's a bunch of resources that have helped me that I know have helped others as well. So you can scan that. And Nikki, I'm going to turn that over to you. Tell me when I should stop sharing with the scanner thing.
Okay, sure. Yeah, while people are maybe posting their questions, I wanted to point out, and this, it was something that stuck out to me, like even earlier in your presentation when you were talking about that victim impact, because we hear from buyers that I'm doing her a favor, she needs money, or it's a rite of passage, or it's a victimless crime, she needed something, I needed something, it was even trade. And just to hear you go through the victim impact, it is clearly not a victimless crime, no matter the age. And even the part too, when you were talking about how you were thought of a certain way in your community because of what was happening to you. People in your community didn't understand, yet the buyers who were doing, and even, you've told me part of your story, but even your trafficker was almost elevated in the community. um, and just the injustice in that was so obvious to me when you were talking about how the community reacted to you versus the buyers. Yeah, and I know another thing that you and I had talked about was with the pornography, and you were talking about how the buyer would show you the pornography, which at the time you said was like a fold out, right? It was a magazine, and say, this is what I want you to be. You could, oh, if you could just be this, and like holding that up to something you should aspire to be. Yeah,
Right.
so this
Yeah.
that object.
Right. That we're literally, some of us can be literally taught to be proud of being the best sex object that we can be, that is a really good thing to work for. In other words, yeah, it's all about creating the belief system. Yeah.
Yeah.
And child, and then as children, that's where our belief systems form, and we depend on other adults to basically tell us what to believe, because on some level we know that we know nothing. So then abusers and perpetrators and enablers, they take advantage of that. They're like, good, they're a blank slate. We're gonna fill in everything that we want them to believe, and they know that it works. Yeah, mind control is what that's called. Yeah.
And we do have a little bit of time left, so I wanted to, and I know we hadn't prepared for this, so if you don't want to answer that, that's fine. But you mentioned non-state torture.
Yeah. Yes. And so
That.
in the chat, let's see, let me go back to this here. Jean Sorensen, I would just go okay, someone did post a link. Good. It's in the chat. If someone wants, whoever asked that, just click on that link and it'll tell you all about it. And basically, the reason why they named it non-state, meaning it happens here in the United States, meaning it's not just in another country. Yeah. Yeah. And they'll explain it better. And basically
Okay.
the purpose of bringing this up is that it's or what they're creating here, these authors, is they just want greater awareness of the term torture. And they want all service providers to know what it is and all the forms of torture, and that it does exist in family systems, and it's huge in family systems. And there's all kinds of torture. It's not just waterboard torture, in other words, and what do you say, Guantanamo Bay, right? It happens in homes. Children are born into homes where this is happening. And I actually do know a survivor of family trafficking where one of her parents pretended they were going to drown her as a form of torture. So that does literally happen. And then psychological torture as well is huge, but that again crosses over into like mind control. So
Right.
anything else?
And then Linda made a comment I thought was great. She said, developing a healthy identity as an adult when you were denied that as a child is an extremely difficult process and requires a community of healthy people surrounding you.
Yeah, that's key, and it is an excellent comment. Yeah, I appreciate that. And that's where I know for me, I now know that my identity is in Christ, and he has brought me to my true identity. My true identity is no longer missing. she's been recovered. In other words, I've brought her home, which is with me. And yeah, Christ led the way. So that's where my identity lies. Um, and then of course joining with other survivors who have the same stories, and other safe Christians as well, is absolutely vital for just getting through my days. Yes.
I'm glad you found that. If you could stop sharing, I've
Okay.
got one slide and then we'll be all done. I think you did amazing. Thank you so much, Jennifer.
Sure.
Sharing that. I told you in the very beginning, guys, that she was her voice was vital to this movement. And now you see she did amazing. All that did great information. All right, so let me share my screen real quick and we'll finish up. We'll bring this home. All right. So I did want to share with you guys this last screen where you can go ahead and register for our fourth and final session, where we're talking about your role in the ripple effect and what you can do to join the demand reduction effort. And we'll be talking to Truckers Against Trafficking, as well as the Coalition of Immokalee Workers, to see what they have done to create their role in this movement. So if you want to join us for that, there's that QR code to scan. And then that's it. I appreciate you guys coming tonight, and thank you again, Jennifer.
Yes.
Have a great night.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you. Good night.
Right.